Is this the picture you had in mind when you imagined what our new year would look like? This week we track the outsized role our area played in this week's remarkable events.
For those who have concerns about the integrity of our elections, those who have concerns about what happened in November, this is the appropriate means.
I think I owe it to the people of Kansas. I owe it to future generations to make sure that we have a safe and secure, a free election system.
Plus, we track the week's other big local issues and newsmakers, the big openings and big closings. Straight ahead.
A man and a woman.
Week in Review is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, Bob and Marlise Gorley, Haas and Wilkerson Insurance, the Courtney S. Turner Charitable Trust, John H. Mize and Bank of America N.A. co-trustees, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nick Haynes. Welcome and Happy New Year to you. I have to say that usually the very first few days of the year make for a very slow news week. Not this year. This half hour, 4 perspectives to help make sense of it all. From KCMO Talk Radio, Pete Mundo is with us. From the pages of the Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. Nationally syndicated columnist for the Tribune News Service, Mary Sanchez. And the editor of the Call newspaper, Eric Wesson. Just a few caveats before we begin. This is a pre-recorded program, and as you know, things can change rapidly. You need to know that. And let me also begin by saying this is not the United States of America in review, so we're not going to dissect every political dimension of what's happening in Washington. But as senators from Kansas and Missouri played an outsized role in the critical events of the week, we want to track their motivations and what happens now. Rockhurst High School graduate, now Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, was the first senator in the nation to challenge the Electoral College vote. He would be joined by a Kansas doctor, now Senator Roger Marshall.
I actually think it's very vital what we do. The opportunity to be heard, to register objections is very vital because this is the place where those objections are to be heard and dealt with, debated, and finally resolved.
I think I owe it to the people of Kansas. I owe it to future generations to make sure that we have a safe and secure, a free election system.
Now, Hawley and Marshall were among a small handful of senators who decided to continue to pursue objections to the election results, even after protesters breached the Capitol building. Both must have known they would be ridiculed and condemned for the move. So what was the motivation for sticking their necks out? Let's start with Josh Hawley, who was the very first senator to challenge the presidential electoral college count. It's claimed this was about him trying to position himself for a run for the presidency in 2024. Is there more to it than that, Pete Mundo?
I think that he may genuinely believe some of what he was going to do or did do on Wednesday night. But let's be honest, I do think the political ambitions were first and foremost. There's going to be a challenge to see who can get the most of the Republican and the Trump base in 4 years. And Josh Hawley, it's no secret, has an interest in doing that. And I think that politics were a lead play. But, I think Rand Paul, who is a very solid conservative guy, he put it well. I mean, if you are a believer in states' rights and you are a believer in the Electoral College system, which has benefited the Republican Party, in my lifetime, the popular vote has been won by Republicans once. This is not really a road you want to go down, a can of worms you want to open up. And those were legitimate concerns. And I think that just political ambition topped the list.
Well, Kansas City Star editorial board said Josh Hawley was putting political ambition before the needs of the country, Dave Helling. But what about, say, Roger Marshall? He's not running for re-election. He's not looking to become president in 4 years. So why would he stick his neck out in this way?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I'm not sure it's answerable at this point, Nick, because it's hard to see an immediate advantage politically for Roger Marshall in taking one of his first steps as a senator to enrage so many people like this. Let me just say this about Josh Hawley. If he has presidential ambitions, which I believe he does, they took an enormous hit based on what happened yesterday. He will, and not so much for what he said on the floor, but the photograph of the junior senator with a raised fist outside the U.S. Capitol will be in every advertisement that somebody runs against him for the rest of his career. And I think that if he had those ambitions, they're in serious jeopardy now.
Eric.
Well, here's my $1 million question. You had the 2 senators from Pennsylvania that endorsed the vote. How do you have a senator from Missouri when Missouri's got a laundry list of issues, worry about what somebody else in Pennsylvania did? You got one of the highest murder rates in the country in the state of Missouri, and you're worrying about what Pennsylvania's doing. To me, that's mind-boggling.
But could that be, though, Mary, that the concern that if you take a lenient approach to how you count votes in any state, that's going to actually make it harder for even these politicians here, whether it be a Josh Hawley or a Roger Marshall, from getting elected themselves?
That's the argument, and certainly he'll try and put that forward. As Dave just said, we'll see how this plays out. And you're right, some of that footage will be played as he tries to run for office again. Where it goes from here, frankly, I think that's a question for America right now. As much as many of us were horrified by the fact that Hawley stuck with it in that argument, there is a whole other portion of America that was not. Mm-hmm. And I think he knows that. And as people forget about some of these images, he could still play this to his advantage.
Was there an upside for Josh Hawley and Roger Marshall, Pete?
An upside is, I think for Hawley, it's what we talked about. And I think for Marshall, as a newly elected senator who owes a lot of his primary win and then, of course, his general election win to Trump voters, I think he felt like he kind of had to go down this road. And let me just be clear, too. I do think it's understandable to have some concerns over some of the way the states handle their votes. But we have a system. These things were pushed to judges and the courts, and the Supreme Court didn't want to take it up. You cannot like that. People cannot like that. But the system did play itself out, and I think that's the most important thing that has to be gleaned from all of this.
Could there be now this other reaction that's taking place, and we're seeing it this week, Cori Bush, the new Missouri congresswoman, calling for Josh Hawley to be removed from the United States Senate. We have Sharice Davids in Kansas calling for the impeachment and removal of President Trump from office. Are they overplaying their hand, Dave?
It isn't just limited to Cori Bush and Sharice Davids. I mean, there's talk of using the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump for the last couple of weeks. I mean, there is a lot of talk of just unique, unprecedented steps because of the concerns that people have. As a practical matter, I don't think Josh Hawley will be removed. I don't think he'll quit. But let's be clear. There was no fraud in the presidential election. There is no other way to say it. It is ridiculous and wrong to conclude by any measure that Donald Trump was not defeated by Joe Biden on November 3rd.
It wasn't just our area Republicans making big news this week. So was Kansas City Democratic Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, but for different reasons.
Local Congressman Emanuel Cleaver is drawing national attention for a prayer.
A man and a woman.
Social media lit up with criticism. Newt Gingrich saying the radical madness has begun.
Cleaver insisted it was a lighthearted pun. So why did his words spur such a torrent of criticism this week, Pete Mundo?
I think it was just kind of an easy way to goof on him. If I'm Emanuel Cleaver, I wouldn't be doing any stand-up comedy anytime soon. His delivery fell flat. That's the problem. He was going tongue-in-cheek, and I think most people that critiqued him were kind of just like, hey, I don't know what he was going for there, but it fell incredibly flat.
Was he surprised by the backlash, Eric?
No, he just kind of blew it off as people not having a sense of humor because the way he did it, he felt was kind of lighthearted in the moment, but there were a lot of people that were offended. I haven't talked to him. I got a text from him yesterday while they were moving the members of Congress out of the Capitol building, and he seemed like he was okay. So.
The prayer came on the same day that the House voted to remove he or she from the chamber's official documents, Mary Sanchez, stripped gender terms like mother and father, husband or wife from House rules. Was Cleaver's prayer caught in the crossfire of that?
I think it was. And some of the pushback, granted, I agree with Pete, some of perhaps the delivery, it was kind of this pratfall that didn't quite work verbally. But there is an awful lot of pushback from people who do not want to see transgender people recognized. They are still arguing about gay and lesbian. I mean, it's just that whole world of where we are in terms of acceptance and language matters.
Now, this week, frontline healthcare workers in Kansas City were getting their second dose of the coveted coronavirus vaccine. The news comes amid questions as to how the shots are being distributed and to who. There have been some reports of critical care workers still waiting for the vaccine, which sparked criticism of Kansas Governor Laura Kelly, who was rolling up her sleeve this week to get the coveted dose, along with Kansas City Mayor Quinton Lucas. It didn't set well with Week in Review viewer John in Kansas City, who said the mayor was just 36 years old with no pre-existing conditions. Yet there are seniors and healthcare workers that are still waiting to take the vaccine. That is extremely selfish. Does it send the wrong message when our public officials get first dibs ahead of first responders and essential workers, Dave?
Well, I think the mayor has said, and I think there's some truth in this, and not just for the mayor, by the way, but members of Congress and others, that taking pictures of them getting the vaccine is actually a pretty good thing. It will encourage others to get it, particularly, I must say, African Americans who are skeptical about the vaccine. Seeing the mayor get the shot was probably a good thing. And look, the shot he got is not really depriving someone else of the vaccination because the rollout has been so chaotic. There have been almost 18 million doses of vaccine delivered to the states. 5 million have actually gone into arms at this point. At this pace, it'll take 8 years to inoculate everyone in the United States. So that's a whole different issue. I think there will be people worried about the mayor, but in the long run, I don't think it was that destructive.
But it was also happening in a week where Kansas Governor Laura Kelly was under criticism as the CDC puts out a list of the states with the lowest vaccination rates, Pete Mundo, and Kansas comes in dead bottom.
Yeah, and they said they said all 105 counties got the vaccine. Osage County is saying we haven't seen any of it yet. It's been a really poor leadership job on that side of the state, between ranking last in the country in getting the vaccine out, last in economic recovery, near the bottom of the list in the 50 states in terms of testing. There's a lot of ways to critique ways politicians and governors have handled this across the country, but one of the worst jobs being done is Laura Kelly in Kansas.
But they said
Quickly, Nick, Osage County got vaccine. It just didn't go to the health department, at least according to the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. So just to clear up that record. But the overall criticism of Laura Kelly is very valid, in part because she blamed this on a paperwork, software, training problem. She uses a lot of dog ate my homework excuses for not only this, but unemployment insurance this year, testing in the state of Kansas, distribution of the vaccine. At some point, the buck has to stop, and it has to stop with Laura Kelly. And in this case, I think the criticism has some validity.
This has actually been much more flexible even than I thought, though, Mary, because even for the medical workers, it is really on an honor system. And so there have been reports of hospital administrators getting the vaccine before people who are even working on COVID wards have had a chance to get it.
Anytime that you have an opportunity for people to overreach and take something that isn't theirs, human nature does play in. And we've seen that already, which, this is partly why you need strong leadership at that state level. So we're in a horrible place where we need to, for the good of public health, have leadership really step up and ensure that these systems are there so that the people get the vaccine.
I want to move on, but I want to bring in Eric Weston for a moment, because Dave Helling said, it was very important for the African-American community to see the mayor getting the vaccine because of concerns. Were there anybody who's looked at that and said, wow, I was concerned before, now I want the vaccine?
Nobody that I've talked to or heard from. I guess they're going to have a rollout of media to help encourage people of color and minorities to take the shot. But because he took it, I don't feel like I need to go run and get in line.
It's been a bad week for retail in Kansas City. Luxury jeweler Tiffany & Company announcing it's departing the Country Club Plaza. The store opened in 2004. Helzberg Diamonds will also close at the end of the month after 70 years on the plaza. Meanwhile, a spate of violence has prompted a 7-day-a-week curfew at one of our largest shopping malls. Unsupervised minors are now banned from Independence Center after 3 p.m. But the hits keep coming, this time from one of its largest anchor stores. Macy's announcing it's leaving Independence Center as part of a national restructuring. These are two very different stories, but both are prompting larger concerns about the future of our local shopping centers. Should we be concerned about the future of Independence Center? Should we be concerned about the future of the Country Club Plaza, Dave?
Well, yes. And in fact, we've talked about that on this show before. Independent Center particularly may become the target. You know, when I first came to Kansas City, Bannister Mall was considered one of the 8th wonders of the world, you know, and it's of course been, you know, bulldozed. And Independent Center may face a similar fate. You know, in-person brick and mortar retail is under pressure in every city in America. And the Plaza is not immune from that, Nick. I'd be very worried if I were Kansas City officials about the health of that institution and trying to figure out a way to transition away from in-person retail to something else in that iconic district.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention in our Year in Review show when we asked our panelists what institution may disappear in Kansas City in 2021. Eric Wesson, you said Macy's.
I absolutely do. You can thank me later. You know, Independence Mall is basically, as Dave said, it's on the same course as Bannister Mall. It's just in a different time frame. Macy's was an anchor, but over the past year and a half, maybe 2 years, it's kind of like a ghost town going in there. I go there all the time to buy my cologne, and just watching the transition now with people and a new ownership of the mall. They changed the security. The security is not as tight as it was when the other owners had it. You get this element in there now that's creating another Bannister Mall.
And a curfew fixes that of teenagers, you know, no teenagers after 3 p.m., Pete?
I don't think so. I think a lot of it, by the way, Nick, Christmas gift 2021 for Eric, upgrade the cologne, all right? That's the number one. But yeah, I think this is really to what Dave said. It's a problem around the nation. It's not unique to Kansas City. It's not going to stay in Kansas City. You've got COVID on top of the fact that people were already shopping more online leading up to all this. So add the pandemic on top of it. It's going to be very, very difficult for some of these big box retail places to hang on moving forward. I think a lot of it will keep shifting online.
And I should point out also, Mary, we you know, this weekend starts Kansas City Restaurant Week. There were plans to cancel the event, but restaurant owners are desperate to get anyone to come through their doors. They're suffering too, with local health officials worrying about an uptick in COVID hospitalizations. Is it possible there's going to be a new shutdown of restaurants and bars?
I heard that prediction. It's a low threshold of profit in most restaurants. And the pandemic has just gone on too long.
We interviewed the mayor, the editorial board before Christmas, and then we talked to him on another program yesterday. And you get the sense that Mayor Quinton Lucas particularly would like to back away, but is not sure that he can, and in fact may pressure the new commissioners in Johnson County to be more aggressive on this regard. But the public's appetite is not for more shutdowns of any businesses by government. Having said that, if you don't fix COVID, Nick, people aren't going to go out to eat or go to the movies or go to shows until they're sure it's safe. That's been true for 6 months. I think it's still true now.
While retail may be suffering, there's plenty of money being thrown at our criminal justice system. This week, the new nearly $200 million Johnson County Courthouse opens its doors in Olathe. It has been the biggest construction project in Johnson County. We in the news media are quick to find fault when things go wrong, are delayed or over budget. Was this a project that delivered as promised, Dave?
Well, it's quite the courthouse, Nick, as I'm sure you've seen photographs of it, and they opened it. I've been critical of that project for a long time. A, because it was paid for by a sales tax approved by voters. Sales taxes are regressive. And B, the Johnson County Courthouse costs twice as much as the federal courthouse in downtown Kansas City, Missouri. That seems excessive, particularly at a time when other institutions of government have needed to tighten their belts.
It got totally lost in all of the news coverage, but on the very same day protesters were storming the U.S. Capitol, Missouri lawmakers returned to Jefferson City to begin a brand new legislative session. Kansas lawmakers will return to Topeka on Monday. Most of the coverage is centered on the health risks of having hundreds of people in close contact with one another in what some opinion writers described as super spreader events. But what about the issues they're dealing with? I noticed this week a Republican lawmaker has introduced a bill in Jefferson City that would change the state constitution, Pete, to legalize the sale of recreational marijuana. This has traditionally been an issue for the Democrats. Now that Republicans are pushing it, could we see total pot legalization on the ballot in Missouri as a result of the session?
Well, I don't know what that appetite will be, but I don't think it's as unlikely as it may have been just a couple of years ago. I think that the Republican Party in general has become more open to that. And also, let's be honest, there's money there for the state, all right? And in a year and a time when these budgets are getting crushed by COVID, these states are looking for money under every seat cushion they can find. It's a way for them, if they do it right, to obviously raise some tax revenues. And I think that ultimately that may be enough of a selling point for some Republicans who might have been on the fence on this.
You know, we fixate on what happens in Washington, D.C., where a lot of major important decisions that affect our lives on a daily basis are happening in our state capitol buildings. These are bills filed this week that would make it a felony, for instance, in Missouri, to publish the home address of a police officer, a bill to protect drivers who run over protesters. There are several bills that would limit the ability of local public health and county leaders to shut down businesses. And a lawmaker has introduced a bill that will require public school districts who are only teaching virtually to foot the bill if a parent decided to send their student to a private school for in-person learning. What issue are you keeping an eye on as lawmakers get to work this week in Jefferson City, Eric?
I would say the bill about putting police officers' information out and running over protesters. I had a difficult time processing the running over protesters. I'm like, how often does that happen versus all the other things that are going on in the state of Missouri?
Mary.
One of the things about covering legislatures that I think media always has to be very careful with is just because something was introduced doesn't mean that it has any traction. And you can get headlines sometimes by writing about these have nowhere to go legislative pieces when actually maybe they shouldn't have that much attention. So you need to look at what is really behind, what is the motivation, and the issue of doxing with police. That is obviously wrapped into Black Lives Matter, feelings about that, feelings about protests. Eric's very right about looking at what actually happens. I do know that a lot of law enforcement, though, is very fearful and has always been fearful within their own families, particularly now.
Dave.
Well, I'm watching Medicaid expansion in Missouri, Nick. I mean, the voters approved it. Will it be implemented? How will it be paid for? How much will it cost? That's a huge issue. And then in Kansas and Missouri, we need to pay a lot of attention to redistricting. There's some talk of trying to gerrymander Emanuel Cleaver's seat, for example. So we need to pay attention to, and Sharice Davids, who is under some pressure now with a veto-proof majority for Republicans in Topeka. So redistricting is important. It'll get started at least in the next couple of months. And then in Missouri, Medicaid expansion.
Now, what about in Kansas? By the way, while there was no violence, hundreds of supporters of President Trump did rally at the State House in Topeka this week. Governor Kelly says she's committed to passing Medicaid expansion in Kansas this session now that the legislature is more conservative as a result of the last election. Is the chances of that happening now slim to none, Pete?
Oh, yeah, I don't see any way. They've got the supermajority, and we talked about it actually on this show, Nick. I think Dave actually pointed it out right after the election, and that was the fact that the Republicans in the state legislature did much better in places like Johnson County, picking up more conservative Republicans in some of these seats, which a lot of people did not anticipate based on how the district and the area had been voting in some of the federal elections. That's a huge deal. I expect them to challenge Governor Kelly on basically everything. They're already ramping up for a governor's race in 2022. That's going to be hotly contested. And I think that's what it's all going to be about. And I don't think she's going to get a whole lot done and get a whole lot of compromise.
Now, as we were on a break from the show over Christmas week and the New Year, the Kansas City Star was making national news as it devoted an almost entire edition of the paper to an apology.
In the wake of this country's reckoning on race this year, a prominent local newspaper is issuing an apology. In a full-page article, the Kansas City Star told readers, quote, "We are sorry."
The Star acknowledging its historic role disenfranchising, ignoring and maligning generations of Black Kansas Cityans in its coverage. It got plenty of national attention from the New York Times and, as you see, from CNN. But did it change any minds locally? Are you patting the Kansas City Star on the back for a job well done, Eric Wesson?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. You know, it's a noble effort. It's an apology that should have been. But I kind of want to get to the elephant in the room. Yesterday, we watched hordes of white people storm the Capitol building. They were invited in and probably got coffee and donuts. Had those protesters been black, it would have been a bloodbath. It would have been a lot more force by the police department. The Kansas City Star that's the reason why the call exists, is because the way mainstream media portrays black people.
Frankly, there is nothing brave or bold about admitting to something that occurred when almost no one who's in positions of power was even alive. We're talking about 50, 100 years ago events. The most recent was 77 with the flood.
I want to get Dave Helling's perspective, but I want to hear first from Pete Mundo.
So I just think it's a weird place to be where people are apologizing for things that they had little to no involvement as individuals themselves. So we're doing a lot of it in America right now. And, it doesn't mean you deny your history, but I just think it's an odd place to be.
Mayor Quinton Lucas, Dave, said it's a great start. He applauded this Kansas City Star, wanted other institutions in our Kansas City area to do the same thing. What change did it really bring about?
Well, we don't know yet, but I will say, Nick, quickly to Eric, Toriana Porter wrote a column today about contrasting what happened with white people in Washington and what might have happened with the Black Lives Matter folks. So we're on that too.
I think it's more than just, well, this happened 50 years ago. No, it didn't. It's still happening. In June, the Star did an editorial about a shooting on 18th and Vine that happened earlier in the year, and they wrote it like it just happened last week. So now we're trying to get development down here, and it's like, well, do I want to go develop down in some place where they're shooting every week? So I don't think it was 50 years ago. I think it was probably 5 months ago.
And on that, we will say our week has been reviewed. Our thanks to this week's news reviewers. Weekdays from 6 to 10 on KCMO Talk Radio, Pete Mundo. Every day in your Kansas City Star, Dave Helling. From the Call newspaper, Eric Wesson. And Tribune syndicated columnist Mary Sanchez. I'm Nick Haynes. From all of us here at Kansas City PBS, keep calm and carry on.